Welcome back to the MidrangeJ. That feels amazing to say. My God, it's been so long. Feels like it's been an eternity since I've last been behind the mic and been able to let out my knowledge and spew my preposterous takes. But welcome back. I've missed everyone. I hope you've all missed the MidrangeJ the same way I have. I hope you've all had a great summer and a wonderful few months off, just enjoying life. I hope you've all just been active, just been getting out there, just seeing what the world has to offer outside of basketball. But unfortunately, or fortunately for us super duper basketball heads, the season's back, so our life is now basketball related again. It's all basketball. Everything we eat, drink, sleep is going to be basketball related from now on. And as that goes along with our traditions, this will be the third edition, I believe, of the season previews. I think for as long as this podcast is going to keep going, the season previews are just going to be a staple at this point. But we want to shake it up. We want to add new stuff every year with the previews. We don't just want to keep the same type of format with the previews, but also there was a small inclination in me that wanted to not do the preview this year, but with the amount of trades and player movement and just the narratives that have been brewing in the summer, there's no way I could skip the season preview. Unfortunately, my two co-hosts, Waleed and Kamal, couldn't make this episode, so you'll just have to get used to me for the meanwhile. But yeah, let's get into it. Let's not waste too much more time with the introductions. Okay, so for the East, my contenders tier list, because I'm going to divide both conferences up, not just by standings but by contenders and by just the overall standings. So I'm going to have a tier list. In the East, I have the Sixers as number 1 seed. I think the Sixers have had terrible luck in the last few years, especially when it comes to injury luck. I'm not really a superstitious guy, but I do believe in bad karma and good karma, and the Sixers have had a lot of negative karma come their way the last few years. And if it's down to mentality, down to front office management, and down to overall direction and heart that some of these players have, that is a fair point to make. A lot of people would say that's unfair, but I do think the Sixers now have the best roster they've ever had since they've had Jimmy Butler. They've got basically next to no excuse. Picking up the Anthony Melton for pretty much Danny Green and a pick that they don't need is straight robbery, if we're going to call it what it is. It's daylight robbery. And also picking up PJ Tucker directly from one of their rivals, weakening a direct rival, is also something that's just going to increase their stock for me just that much. I do think they're going to blow away the regular season, and yeah, that's my 1 seed. And for my 2 seed, I have the Boston Celtics. Now, before the Ime Udoka scandal, I did have them as the 1 seed, and I was thinking, I'm not too sure about this new coach that they've got, Joe Mazzulla. I didn't know how credible he was, if he can really take that mantle of being the head coach. But if I'm being honest and I'm being completely objective, they will be good. They will always be a good ball club with this roster. Whether I wanted to put them at the 2nd seed or 3rd seed or the 4th or 5th seed, they just weren't ever going to be in any direct danger of missing out on a playoff spot or ever falling too low where there's a real crisis within the team. Because any team that has Malcolm Brogdon coming off the bench is going to be a top seed. They're going to have a home court in the playoffs. And as much as the drama behind Ime and the whole Jaylen Brown being traded for KD and Tatum not really defending him, and a lot of people trying to create something out of that when a lot of it was also just speculation, is something that's created drama within the organization that wasn't there. And a team that was really 2 wins away from an NBA title is now at a point where they've basically got everything to lose when they could have had everything. So I'm not too dramatic when it comes to the Boston Celtics current situation. They've still got a bright future. They've got tremendous roster. They've got crazy depth. They're one of the best defensive teams. They might be the best defensive team in the league. And Adam Brogdon has only helped alleviate their weaknesses of needing a bench scorer and a bench creator and a guy to kind of smooth out their offense, which they tried to make Derek White, which wasn't really his role to fit. Brogdon fits this role a bit better, and Derek White can now play off of Brogdon and actually stay in his role that he is actually pretty good at, which is a two-way player, just off the ball, kind of scoring within the gaps of the defense while having someone else creating for him, and kind of just operating as a secondary and tertiary ball handler and playmaker. But yeah, Celtics number 2. And number 3, I have the Toronto Raptors. The Raptors last year won 48 games with a beaten up squad. Siakam missed the first month. OG missed like half the year. Fred was injured for like half the year. Even though he played, he was basically injured. Gary Trent missed a lot of time. They had no bench. And first question is, Fahad, how did they address any of that? They barely picked up anyone. They only got Otto Porter and re-signed everyone they had. You're correct. But this is year 2 for Scotty Barnes. And Siakam and Van Vliet are just entering their primes. This is a very young team. And I think, much like for the Boston Celtics, the continuity speaks volumes with this team. And having the same spine of the team returning and young players improving and just incrementally taking that step, I do think the pathway for the Raptors to be a top 3 team isn't impossible. And I do think a lot of noise is made out of the Raptors being a top 3 seed when it shouldn't be. If you look at all the teams that they're ahead of, a lot of them they were ahead of last year, and they're only going to be better this year. I guess the only question marks you could say is, will they be better than Milwaukee? Will they be better than Miami? I think they will be better than Milwaukee in the regular season. Whether they'll be better in the postseason is still a question to be asked about how legit are the Raptors. Any team that is the top 3 seed is within that contender range. They're in that contender realm. They might not be on the tier, but they're in that realm and they're floating, and they're posing the question, is this team legit? And that's yet to be found out. My initial thoughts, if not a single player gets injured in the regular season and everyone's healthy in the postseason, I do think the Raptors are still going to be the 3rd seed, and I do think the Raptors can win a playoff series, will win a playoff series, and could make it to the conference finals. That's obviously with the caveat that not a single soul gets injured. However, that's not how basketball works. Everyone knows that isn't how it works, and we will just have to see how it shakes up. But my stock in the Raptors is higher than ever. And before opening night, I don't want to rev up the engines too much, but I've got a lot of faith in this young team, and I do think they will make some noise sooner rather than later. And for my 4th seed, I have the Milwaukee Bucks. Now the Bucks are the real demons in the East. They've kind of last few years been on cruise control. I think since they've won the title last year and even the title year, their regular season record wasn't jaw-dropping like it used to be when they had those earlier Giannis teams with Bledsoe and as his point guard, and it was just him and Middleton, and they were winning like 67 games, 65 games, 62 games, and just routinely being bounced out the playoffs. That team exists no more because Giannis doesn't play those type of minutes anymore, and I think that's the main difference with this Milwaukee Bucks team. They're okay with winning just 50 games. They're okay with winning just 51 games, 52 games, and go into the postseason with everyone healthy. And I think that's their main goal. And I think the Milwaukee Bucks, as good as they are, they won't get into that top 2 seed just because of how they use their players, how often they load manage, and just how much they need to, at least now more than ever, worry about the injuries, because they just missed out on Middleton when in the last playoffs they could have used him and ended up in the finals or even have won a chip. So yeah, the Milwaukee Bucks, that's my 4th seed. I don't really have too much more to say about them. They're just so complete as a team. I think there are a few questions that could be asked about them. Is their defense falling off? Is Lopez ever going to return to the level he was at before? Are the back injuries starting to ruin him? Can Ibaka be a nice complementary piece for them off the bench? Do they have a backup big at all? If not, what would that look like for them now that the East is essentially looking as good as ever? So yeah, I think those are the only questions really you can ask about them. But I think that's the beauty of the East, or the NBA really, is that every team has a question about them. And if you really want to be meticulous about it, you can ask a question about every single team. But yeah, with that being said, I have the Milwaukee Bucks as my 4th seed. And my 5th seed, I have the Miami Heat. Now, I was flirting between putting the Miami Heat and not the Boston Celtics, and the Cleveland Cavaliers as the 5th seed. I ended up going with Miami, just out of respect, really. they've done it before. They've got experience. The questions are. So I've gone with the Miami Heat out of respect. They were one Jimmy Butler pull-up three away from the NBA Finals. So at the very worst, that's a team that has shown their capabilities of winning series, and not just winning series, but winning games in the regular season that they're supposed to win, which to me is more of a mark of a team that's excellent and shows a high level of excellence than a team that just wakes up and wins against the good teams and snoozes against the terrible ones. Obviously, you then ask me why the hell would I put the Raptors above the Heat. You literally just described why you want the Heat above the Raptors. I also think there's a lot of questions that could be asked about the Heat, which is Bam going to take that next step? I don't think he will. How can they replace PJ Tucker with Caleb Martin, with KZ Okpala? Like, who are they going to bring in that can bring that impact at the forward spot? Or will you have to slide Jimmy up a slot and make him play up just so you can have one of your wings like Oladipo and Gabe Vincent now take the 3 spot? And I know the new era of positionless basketball, you don't really have slots to take up, but it's more so the role is defensively. It's Jimmy Butler going to be put under that same burden to defend the best perimeter player while also having to be extremely responsive on the back line and carry those two responsibilities virtually as one, which essentially is impossible. You can't be in 2 places at one, but it also means he's going to have to alleviate some responsibility to a few of the other wings on their team, and I'm just not sure if I'm fully convinced the Miami Heat have that type of wing depth to really take the pressure off of Jimmy Butler and still be the same team that they are in the postseason as they are in the regular season, which they were dominant last year, and I'm just not sure they can replicate that this year. So they're my 5th seed for now. I think the Cavs is my 6th seed. I do think they're going to be a great regular season team. Perhaps above the Miami Heat. They look like they've got the makings of a great regular season team. They've got 2 elite rim protectors that is already going to be the staple of their top 10 defense, and they've now got 2 mega guard initiators in Garland and Spider, Donovan Mitchell, which is their newest acquisition. Tremendous pickup. This Cleveland team could make some noise. The reason why I don't have them as high is perhaps I'm a little underwhelmed by just the team fit. They don't have a wing, and a lot of their guards can't defend. And to me, that looks like the recipe for a team that's a great regular season team, not so great in the postseason when you can just attack mismatches. And even nowadays, we play in a mismatch league. This NBA is a mismatch league. Everyone hunts everyone. So no one can just stand in the corner and just guard a bum in the corner anymore. Like, if you want to be hunted, you will be hunted by the other team. And I think it's just too much ground for Mobley and Garland to cover. Okoro is a great wing defender too, so it could mesh well, but I'm just not quite sold on Okoro exactly. I think it's a weird fit. It's reminiscent of what the Minnesota Timberwolves are trying to do with Kat and Rudy in the front court, except it's got its own underlying deficiencies that the other duo can kind of compensate for because of the team fit around them. Whereas with this team, it's like outside of Okoro, who do they have to guard wings? Who do they have to guard elite 3s and 4s? Because Okoro himself is a little undersized. Are you going to put, like, when it really gets down to the nitty-gritty in the East, are you going to put Okoro on KD? Are you going to put Mobley on KD? Are you going to put Tatum on, like, you're going to put Mobley on Tatum? You're going to put Mobley on Giannis, Siakam, Jarrett Allen on Embiid? Is he going to hold up? Like, are these guys really going to hold their own against just the elite wings and bigs in the Eastern Conference? And I'm not too sure they will. So that's why I have them as the 6th seed. Now, the Brooklyn Nets haven't been mentioned, so you haven't been going crazy. I haven't mentioned them. I have them as the 7th seed, and the reason why I have them this low is because I just don't think that the Brooklyn Nets are that good. Simply put, I just don't think they're that good. They don't have big man depth. Ben Simmons is gonna come back, and there's gonna be a lot of growing pains. Or not really growing pains, but just he's gonna be very rusty. And I think just the last time I saw that team kind of just left a bad taste in my mouth, and I just don't think they're set up to be a tremendously great regular season team. They're still, in terms of their team build, look like a team that's going to be not too great defensively. I'm not too sure how many games we're going to get out of KD and Kyrie, especially KD at this point in his career. As the years are going on, he's just looking just that much more closer to just being physically diminished and having to take those days off and having to play less minutes. And to be honest, in the last playoffs, that last stretch of the season where he was forced to play all those minutes to try and get the Nets back up to speed, did him a lot more harm than good. But it also did show that his durability isn't at the level that it once was, and that could be a problem. With the whole Kyrie thing, if Kyrie plays the whole season and he has no problems, he's not injured, there's no internal drama, and same goes with Ben Simmons. If I would say they were the 5th seed, would I be shocked? No, I do think they're interchangeable with those two teams above them. Do I see them becoming the 4th seed or above? No way in hell. You can quote me on this. The Nets won't be that good. And that's my justification for having them as the 7th seed. Is I think maybe the play-in tournament is probably where they look at as, we can't be in the play-in tournament. If we're in the play-in tournament, this is a failed season. And essentially, I think they're going to have a failed season. But yeah, that's my 7th seed. My 8th seed is the new look Atlanta Hawks. Sorry, Chicago fans. Atlanta's going to be better than you guys. I think a lot of that is to do with the fact that the Bulls don't have Lonzo Ball. I do think those two teams are in the same kind of ballpark. Adding DeJounte Murray is going to free up Trae Young even more, and I do think that's a great fit. But with that being said, I don't like what they have orbiting around them too much. They just got rid of Herter, who I thought was a decent piece for them, and yeah, they don't really have too much going on around them. DeAndre Hunter is a solid player. I do like his game. He's a nice defensive wing that has a semblance of shot creation, and he did exhibit that in flashes in the postseason last year. So I can kind of see them having a path into being a playoff team, but for now I have them as a play-in team. I wouldn't be shocked if they make the playoffs, because with those 8 teams I've mentioned now, one of them has to go home. And if you were to ask me, I think it's the Chicago Bulls. Not having Lonzo Ball and not having a great, not just defensive identity, but having no real depth, to me is their first sign of weakness. They did acquire Goran Dragic and Andre Drummond, however, so they could be a team that makes some noise in that particular regard. Yes, I messed up. Those acquisitions that the Chicago Bulls did make in Goran Dragic and Andre Drummond were great pickups to solidify their otherwise weak depth, and it now gives a little more leeway to the team if they experience injury trouble. However, without Lonzo and without a sustained period of time with their point guard, and without a sustained period of time with their point guard, I'm not quite sure I want to put the Chicago Bulls anywhere above the 6th or 7th seed, really. I think you could make the case that they're better than Atlanta. You could call me a hater for putting them below Atlanta. You could make a case that they might finish with a better regular season record than one of either Miami, Cleveland or Brooklyn. But I think for them to get a solidified playoff spot, which is the top 6, they'd have to be better than not just one of those 3 teams in Miami, Cleveland and Brooklyn, along with Atlanta, but they'd have to be better than 2 of those teams, and I'm just not sure I see that much decline from the other teams, especially Miami and Brooklyn, and I'm just not sure they match up to Cleveland all too well. Chicago have a terrible time with injuries too, if I'm being honest. They were the 1 seed, and if they were fully healthy, I would probably be making a different argument for them. But I think Lonzo's impact is just too much on this team. The way this team has been built, it hasn't been built on the spine of a defensive identity, and I think that's their main issue. Because when you lose someone like Lonzo or Caruso for an extended period of time, your team just looks completely different, and a lot of people just forget just how good you really are. And I sound like one of them. I could be one of them. I've just forgotten how good this team can really be when they're healthy, and I'm just not entirely sold. I think the whole losing every game against any team that has any type of ability last year was kind of sad to watch as well, because for you to be part of the creme de la creme, for you to be part of the top, not only do you have to take care of the bottom feeders, but you also have to prove that you're not one of them by taking care of the top and at least matching up. I'm not saying you have to have the best record. You don't have to go 16-2 against the top 3 seeds, but you do have to show that you can at least hang with them. And the Bulls did the exact opposite of that. They showed they couldn't hang with anyone, and I think that's probably why my stock in them is so low. And especially without a point guard, I just don't think I'm gonna correct that take or my stock until I see them with Lonzo and how they look again. But that's my top 9 so far. My last playing team for the East will be the new Washington Wizards. Yep, not the New York Knicks, the Washington Wizards. I do like that trade for Porzingis. Having Dinwiddie and Bradley Beal wasn't the best combination. It wasn't the worst, but I don't think it was the best. I think for Beal to fully thrive, he needs a proper facilitating point guard, not just a point guard who's ISO heavy and takes away touches from him and kind of scores and bursts and facilitates and bursts. I think drafting that new kid, Davis, is gonna do them a lot of good, as well as having Kuzma now and Porzingis. The 3 of them didn't play much together last year, but the 3 of them individually did play pretty well when they were on the floor, and I did see a lot of good things that I liked from them. They still have Rui Hachimura as well, and they have their own stockpile of wing players that, if everyone's healthy and the team situation is favourable, they could start flashing into some very good role players. And I have them as my playing team. Right after them, I have the New York Knicks, who have just acquired Jalen Brunson from the Dallas Mavericks. I'm not sure I like that pickup too tough, just because Brunson operates on like the same kind of spots as RJ Barrett, and yeah, I don't know if I like the fit too well. I think the worst thing they could have done is get a guard that's ball dominant and is a score heavy guard who isn't the best playmaker, who is pretty much a cone on defense too. But it wasn't the worst thing they could have done. The worst thing they could have done is get no one and force Derrick Rose to play 30 minutes a game again. So it is a step forward, but I think the main questions for these guys is Julius Randle really just finished at this point? Is this who he is? Was that 1 year a joke? Was he trolling us like Did he actually mean to be that good? Or is there a player in there somewhere? And I think the second question, or most other people's first questions, because they've given up on Julius Randle. I'm not too sure if I've completely given up on him just yet, but the second question is RJ Barrett a superstar in disguise, or a star, not a superstar, but is he a star in disguise? Is he a star that's being held back by his team situation, maybe by Randle because of the usage next to him? Is he going to be held back now again by adding another ball dominant guard who likes to operate in his spots, who likes to run pick and roll and go downhill to create a shot and attack the rim? I don't like this too much for RJ Barrett's development, but he's had a lot of reps when it comes to just scoring, being the guy on his team. Him and Randle have had too many reps with that. So I think adding a player who now you have to balance touches with, and they need to really understand how they can impact the game without having the ball in their hands, or impacting the game but only having about 5 to 10 seconds to operate, versus having entire multiple possessions dedicated to them in every quarter. So this could be good for RJ Barrett's development. And just the New York Knicks youngsters as well, will they be given a real chance? The bench lineup featuring IQ, Emmanuel Quickley and Obi Toppin were their best units, full stop. Those bench units with Derrick Rose too, they were the best lineups that they had, and they didn't play too much. Like, those lineups might have been skewed because they were playing other bench units, but they were by far and away their best lineups, like to the point where they started playing Quickley more and were winning games when he was starting. And to me, I think Quickley's flashes and what he's shown are not just flashes. I think there is some real potential there. So will the Knicks explore that potential that their young players have? Maybe a mid-season trade is on the cards, who knows? But that's my 11th seed, and the first team that's looking in from the outside. Now, the Charlotte Hornets, I had them as my 12th seed. I had them below the Wizards. I don't think the Hornets will be too great. I think losing Miles Bridges is a major loss, especially because they look like for the first time they were actually building some semblance of consistency, and they look like they were about to take that next step with their young core and perhaps maybe set themselves up for a potential move down the line that could make them acquire that third piece to put next to LaMelo and Miles Bridges. But I feel like he's kind of changed the direction of the franchise after the criminal investigations that they've put him under. I just don't see the Hornets making too much noise this year. I don't even know if they'll make the play-in tournament. I could see them in that fighting for that last spot in the play-in tournament, probably just because of how good LaMelo will be next year. But I also wouldn't be shocked if they're like the 13th seed and they just shut down LaMelo and they kind of mirror what the Oklahoma City Thunder are doing. It will be a tough season for them, and it's not going to be anywhere as successful as it was last year, anywhere as fun as it was last year. And yeah, I think the only thing that could save some grace for them is LaMelo Ball will most likely be an all-star because of just the popularity that he's going to acquire this year with just all that usage and the numbers he's going to put up and the performances he's going to put up. He'll most likely get an all-star spot in the playoffs. The next team I have is the Orlando Magic. I have them as the 12th seed. I could put them a little higher. I do think they have a nice young team. They're not quite ready yet. It is still a team that's led by rookies and sophomores, but rookies and sophomores with potential nonetheless. In Franz Wagner, Banchero, they have Wendell Carter Jr., who's coming into his own now after departing from Chicago. Also, Markelle Fultz, unfortunately he's injured. They say it's not going to be too long, but hopefully it's nothing disastrous and impactful to him for too long. Could he make that next step into being a high level starter now, borderline all-star level player? Like he's always been touted to be a generational player when he was coming in, but can he at least slowly climb back up the ranks and tick off every checklist? I think last year he checked off he can be a solid bench guard, check. He can be a good bench guard, he's checked that off. So now it's time to check off great starting point guard and high level starter, borderline all-stars next for him. And I think, the Magic, it's not all doom and gloom. They will be a nice young fun team, but they're just not ready yet. Same as the Detroit Pistons, they just aren't ready. They've got Cade Cunningham, the franchise, Jaden Ivey now, Duren. They still got their nice pieces and wings, and Sadiq Bey and Hamidou Diallo, and they've still got their bruiser Isaiah Stewart. So it's a nice young team, and they just acquired Bogdanovic. So are they cooking something? Are they cooking something up? Who knows? For now, to me, they look like a team that's in the same situation as the Orlando Magic, just another young team that isn't going to make too much noise. That's about it with the Pistons. They're not really going to do too much this year. I think they're more focused on the draft and just developing players now. And after that, I have the Indiana Pacers, another team that I don't think will be great. I think they're going to start blowing it up. They got rid of Brogdon. I think they've been shopping Buddy Hield and Miles Turner heavy, especially to the Lakers. The Lakers aren't budging with their 2 first-round picks being held for ransom in this exchange alongside Westbrook. I think the Indiana Pacers have just entirely given in to chasing for Wembanyama, and that's really as far as it goes with Indiana. They're just looking at the next season as just a testing ground. These teams that I had are not in the same exact spots as they have them in the standings, as they are in the tier list, but they are roughly in the same ballpark. I do think you do start to see a lot of differentiation as it goes down the tiers. There are some teams that you just start to wonder what is their purpose, what are you doing in this conference. But every team has their own journey, right? And it's just the way of the NBA. It's a yin and yang. Some teams are at the top for an extended period of time, but then it just flips after 4 years, 5 years. But for me, my contenders tier is the Sixers, the Celtics, and the Bucks. Those are the 3 teams in my tier 1, which I call the contenders tier. And in my tier 2, who are like, these are the teams that are kind of locked in for the playoffs, right? If they don't make the playoffs, it's an upset. This is a shocker. Their season is probably going to end. You probably look at some major movement in terms of player movement. You'll start to see maybe star players being traded, coaches being fired. Just the franchise will be on fire if these teams don't make the playoffs. Hence why I call them locked in for playoffs. This is my locked in playoff tier. And I have in this tier, I have Toronto, Miami, Brooklyn, and Cleveland. These are the 7 teams for me, at least, in this tier. I think after this, there's a slight drop off. And the 2 teams in the next tier, which is kind of I'm stuttering. Yeah, stop this. This tier I like to deem the upset tier, tier 3. Because if they take any team in the tier above's playoff spot, it's most likely an upset. I wouldn't bet my money on either of these teams taking anyone else's playoff spot or winning a series. But if these teams, if both of them ended up in the playoffs and sent one of them home, it would be a slight shock, if I'm being honest. But I wouldn't be too surprised, just because of the nature of the conference and how most likely a lot of these teams will be divided by a few games. In this tier 3, I have the Atlanta Hawks and the Chicago Bulls. I do think those 2 are where the drop-off begins when it comes to the playoff teams. They're just not as playoff ready, both in the regular season and in the postseason, as teams like Miami and Toronto and Brooklyn or Cleveland. But they are better than the teams that are looking to the play-in tournament, which is my tier 4, the Wizards, the New York Knicks, and the Charlotte Hornets. And these are the last remaining teams that have, I guess, any type of ambition of winning games, any type of motivation to get up and win games. Because after that, tier 5 right at the bottom is the tanking young teams, Detroit, Indiana, and Orlando. They just want to be in the draft. They want the top pick, and they want to get Wembanyama. So that's my Eastern Conference standings and contenders preview. I'll be moving on to my short list for the All-Stars in the East, and I have, so for my Eastern Conference 2022-2023 All-Star shortlist, my starting lineup, I have Trae Young and Jaylen Brown as my 2 guards in the backcourt. Starting in my front court, I have Kevin Durant, Giannis Antetokounmpo, and Joel Embiid. As my forwards off the bench, I have Jason Tatum, Pascal Siakam, and Jimmy Butler. And my guards off the bench, I have DeMar DeRozan, James Harden, and Donovan Mitchell. And with my wild card, I have LaMelo Ball as my last All-Star selection. These All-Star picks were tough to do and to start and to balance between who would get in because of popularity and who would get in because they actually deserve to be an All-Star, and team records and all of that stuff. I think I tried to make it the biggest combination of all of them. I tried to factor in popularity as long as how I see each person's season going out, along with their team season. I think the hardest decision for me was whether I included Kyrie or LaMelo Ball, who I had to kind of send home, and what it meant for, I guess, the politics of the All-Star game. Can the Nets have 2 All-Stars while being the 8th seed or the 7th seed when another guy is just so clearly better than the guy who's taken his spot statistically? I think LaMelo's going to have a huge year, but can you give a team 2 All-Stars? So that should wrap it up for today. That is the Eastern Conference standings preview for the 2022-2023 season. The Western Conference will be coming shortly soon, and thank you for viewing this video. I hope you enjoy it, and all the socials and links will be down below. Get at the MidrangeJ, and I'm out.